Hi everyone, my name is Adam Botterill. I'm the Senior In-House Counsel at Waterstone Insolvency, and with me I've got my colleagues Kelly and William, and we're going to do a quick video about voluntary administration and what we've noticed the trends are in VAs, and also what the usefulness is compared to other insolvency options. So we're going to do a bit of a QA style, so Will and Kelly are going to ask me some questions. Hopefully I know the answers, and hopefully it's helpful to those out there that are looking at potential insolvency restructuring ideas.
Cool. So I'll kick off. Adam, can you tell us a wee bit about voluntary administrations in general, how they work? What's the difference between, for example, a voluntary administration and a liquidation?
Sure. Okay. It's a nice, easy question to kick off with. So a VA is essentially a pause process that it's time essentially for a company to work out whether it can be saved or whether it can't be. So really the critical difference with a VA over a liquidation is that the company can still be saved once it's in VA. So that's by way of a deed of company arrangement, or if the company can pay all its creditors, it may just go back to the board at the watershed meeting. So I guess functionally with a VA, there's two compulsory meetings. We don't have this with liquidations. We normally have one meeting that liquidators generally dispense with and they don't hold. But with a VA, you have two compulsory meetings, the first creditor meeting, then the watershed meeting. It's really at the watershed meeting where the destiny of the company is decided. So will the board present an acceptable DOCA? Can it be saved? Or will the creditors vote to place the company into liquidation at that time? So really, I see it like a pause, a bit of a freeze in time to work out what the options are, and the administrator is working, pretty flat tack during this period to get the answers and to frame a recommendation for the creditors about what should happen. So there's a pretty high level of involvement to work out what should be done, and that's obviously hard work, but it can pay off.
Nice. From my understanding, a liquidation can be terminated on application if certain criteria are met. For example, that the creditors of the liquidation are paid and the liquidator's fees are reimbursed. How is that different from the company being rescued in a voluntary administration, for example?
Sure. Well, I guess the difference between a 250 application and the company sort of passing back to the board and VA is quite different, because with the 250, you actually need to make the application to court. So you have the costs and expense of that application itself, and you have to pay the creditors normally in full. So there's no ability to compromise the creditors' debts potentially in that process. You've got to pay the full whack, whatever that is. I guess the thing with a VA is that from the get-go, you could craft a DOCA that is a compromise and that will pay creditors a certain amount over a certain amount of time. So it's not always 100 cents. It could be less if the creditors are willing to accept that, and they're going to get more out of it than a liquidation. So I guess there's a pretty big difference there, that one, you don't have to make the application to court. You can get the company back through that DOCA. Also at the watershed meeting as well, the creditors can vote the company back to the board, just if they're confident that it can obviously succeed. So that's really the two main differences there that I can tell.
Nice. And a liquidation can be commenced by order of the court or shareholder appointing a liquidator or a special resolution of the board. How is a voluntary administration commenced, and who can commence it?
Just to clarify that last point, so a liquidation can't be commenced by the board. A liquidation normally is commenced by the shareholders voting via special resolution, or by order of the court by a creditor or a prejudiced shareholder or other. So the board does not appoint a liquidator. That is the shareholders. So the difference being with the voluntary administration is that it's actually appointed by board resolution. So the directors themselves can request that an administrator be appointed. So sometimes it's used as a way to resolve problems where you don't have shareholder agreement or support, but the board realizes that there is an issue that has to be dealt with by an administration.
And in your experience, what's been the main precursor to administration as compared to liquidation? Is it a specific type of problem that you're seeing, or is it a shareholder dispute, or some other type of issue that the company is normally seeing?
All right, they're very much the same. The problems are often, like you say, there's a shareholder dispute. There's either a lot of debts outstanding, the company's in stress. So the problems are the same. Only I would say that in an administration, they're often not as severe. So with a liquidation, I really kind of think of it like a one-way track. Once you're on that train, you're not really going to jump off unless special circumstances arise and the liquidator can pay all the creditors and everyone's secured. But with an administration, often the company is not quite as stressed. It just needs some time to work out what the options are in terms of its operation moving forward. Can it continue on, or does it need to be a shutdown?
Mm. And what's the general success rate in terms of companies being able to continue on after being placed in administration? Is it from your experience, is it a high percentage of success, or?
Not anecdotally. I think that often the administration can be used as a way to liquidate the company without the shareholders' resolution. So essentially,
Right.
it's placed into administration and then it's placed into liquidation with not a lot of fanfare or DOCA being presented. I think from what I've seen in the numbers last year, Kelly will talk about this a little bit, but there were probably about 7 deed of company arrangements entered into of around 30 or so administrations. So that's not a great strike rate, but I guess there is definitely a way forward. And some of those, perhaps the board voted or the company was voted back to the board, but I don't know the specifics.
Right, thank you. That's my grilling done. Kelly, do you have any further questions about administrations and how you see them?
Yeah, great, thanks, Will. So I had a look on the New Zealand Gazette website and just at some of the statistics. And from 2018 to 2019, we've seen a significant increase in companies going into voluntary administration. And it appears that continues to be the case. So I'm not sure, Adam, if you can provide some insight into why that might be.
Well, I agree there has been an uptake, an increase in uptake in administrations, and I don't know the why. I'm not sure whether it's just that there's more complicated shareholding arrangements where companies can't get a special resolution passed to liquidate, or whether perhaps that companies are not quite as in distress and maybe can be saved. I really don't have an insight on why they're increasing. We just know they are. So in terms of that, we've seen ourselves, we've done 5 administrations this year, which is quite a lot. The years before I hadn't done any.
Okay.
So there's been a definite spike, and I mean, we're seeing them for a variety of reasons, and I think that it's like I discussed with Will, there are the companies need some time to restructure, but they just don't know the way forward and need to have some external help to guide through that process, and that's where the administrator comes in. But in terms of the why, I can't tell you. I can tell you why I think they're good and why I think they're really useful options. But in terms of other people's motivations, I don't really have the answer to that one.
Okay, thank you. And then just one more question. You'd mentioned earlier with the DOCAs, and obviously there have been 28 companies that have already gone into voluntary administration this year, 7 of those being subject to a deed of company arrangement. Maybe you can just explain a little bit more, what a DOCA is and how it works.
Okay, so a DOCA is, I mean, from the ones that we've prepared are quite comprehensive documents. They have to outline things by statute that, there's specific things that have to be dealt with in the docker. Normally, it outlines the proposal being put forward, so the payments and time period, any special conditions. It outlines the company's assets, liabilities, and the administrator will normally give a recommendation whether to accept the docker or not. And often the test for that is whether the outcome from approving the docker will put the creditors in better stead than if they had a straight liquidation. So normally that comes about via money that the board's willing to tip into the docker to make it successful, that the company wouldn't otherwise have access to in a liquidation. So essentially, it outlines what's going to happen, when payments will be made, how much. What are the powers of the administrator during the docker's enforcement? So often they will reserve some power. It just essentially sets out what's going to happen. It's quite complex. So when we've done them, we've liked to send out like a covering note with them to kind of explain how it all works and what the key terms are, because they can often run 30 pages if you're not careful. So it's good to have a bit of a Cliff Notes version of what's involved. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well,
Nice.
I think that's enough grilling for today. So thanks, thanks for that.
To turn it around on one of you two, and I can do liquidations and receiverships.
Maybe for next time.
Yeah, I think that it's something to really consider if you are in financial trouble and you think that the legs of the company are good and you want to continue on. An administration is a perfect way to give you time to come up with an arrangement and get the creditors on board and try and work through it. And I think that people are seeing that as more and more attractive as time goes on, especially with the current uncertainty around lockdowns and COVID and everything like that. So something to really to consider if you are needing some advice. Talking to a administrator in an insolvency firm like Waterstone and having a chat about that.
Nice, thank you, Adam.
Well, thanks for watching, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, and see you next time with our next update video.